Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's presentation. My name is Bill Cody, and I'm one of the co-chairs of Lake County Lake Lovers. And I want to thank you for joining us tonight for the Septic Insights and Impacts. Pat, do you have our slides up yet? If you can put on the
Um,
introduction slide.
I am sharing them.
Yep,
Okay.
I'm seeing them, Bill. So
Yep.
All right. I'm having a little conductivity issues, so I'm going to be kind of just working off of my um, connection that I have. So, anyways, uh, before we dive in, just a quick word about who we are and what we do. Pat, if you could maybe move that slide to
I did.
very good. Thank you. Uh, we believe that lakes are what make Lake County great. Yet, the hard truth is that the majority of our 173 lakes are in decline. The Lake County Health Department has been very clear that neither government funding alone can save our lakes and reverse this trend. Real lasting change will come only through committed volunteers. The volunteers in action. People like you and me who are care enough to just step up. That's how we work. We find, engage, and guide passionate volunteers to take smart, synergistic actions while building a strong partnership with the local and national leaders. And we've been very successful with that. So, what do we actually do? I believe to the next slide.
yeah,
Okay.
actually, back to the prior slide. We sum it all
All
up
right.
in one.
In one
Okay.
slide.
All right, let me go over this slide a little bit. It's what we actually deliver. We measure water health and build clear public trend lines so everyone can see what's happening. We engage students, community scientists, giving the next generation a hands-on way to protect what will inherit. And we invite the public and private donors to partner with us so that we can do even more. And that is so important right now as our group in growth has been spectacular in the last year. Well, the best part is anyone can consider themselves a lake. Membership is completely free. If you'd like to join us, just look at the join link down in the chat during the presentations and you can sign up in seconds. Okay, so on to tonight's program. If you live near a lake or simply have love of one, you know how much these waters shape our recreation, our property values, and our sense of community. But lake health just isn't about what we see on the surface. It's also about what's happening underneath, underground, especially with septic systems. So why is this important? As the first slide shows, development of our beautiful Lake County means waste flow more closely to our lakes and waterways. The impact is considerable in terms of nutrient loading, as a chart that we'll show in a little bit shows the level of phosphorus and chlorophyll A present with different levels of development. So tonight, we'll start with a fast, practical 30-minute briefing. It's followed by with questions and answers. If you do have a question, please use the chat button at the bottom of your screen and go ahead and put your question into the chat and we'll get to it. Afterwards, we'll also take audience questions as well. So we're going to be looking at the impact of the Fox Waterway and what the leaders and the homeowners can do to prevent problems before their water quality is harmed. So we're really honored tonight for having this outstanding panel. Pat Smarto, Chair of the Fox Waterway Advisory Committee and broker owner of Lakes Realty Group. Robert Buzz Mazzeffi, Septic System owner and Lake County Lake Lovers Tech Team Leader for Lake Catherine and the Channel Lakes. And Jeff Boeckler, lead researcher on the Fox Waterway Septic System, study and water response specialist, and Sepheros Environment. Bonus of this program is that you will see tonight a demonstration of an actionable map highlighting challenges and the best practices homeowners can implement, and because insight only matters if it leads to action. So whether you're a lake resident, an HOA leader, volunteer, or even a conservation advocate, tonight is about equipping you to be a stronger steward. So I'm very happy to introduce Pat. Would you take it away, please? Enjoy, everyone.
Thank you so much. All right. Hi, all. As said, I'm the chair of the Fox Waterway Advisory Committee. We are a dedicated group of volunteers, and we have really sunk our teeth into this watershed plan over the last couple of years. For those of you that may not be familiar with the Fox Waterway, it's an agency that was created over 30 years ago. They have jurisdiction over 15 lakes and 30 miles of Fox River. When they were created, they had a mission, and a couple of the points in the mission was that they were going to maintain the system for recreational use, restore environmental quality, and enhance the quality of life. And in order to do that, the waterway identified that they really needed to have a watershed plan. There had never been one done in our area before, and it was critical to move forward and try to meet those missions of especially restoring environmental quality. They went to the well a couple of times and finally got grant funding, which was given to the waterway in July of 2022. Jeff was the consultant that helped work with us on that over that 2-year period. He was brave enough to spend some time on a boat in April, which for those of us in Northern Illinois know that boating in April is not very much fun. And he spent a lot of time in this entire watershed. The findings, which we're going to talk specifically about septic, but some of the other findings as well, identified what do we need to do? What are our best management practices to improve that quality? And what practices will have the greatest impact in our very unique watershed? I get to move my own slide. So when you create a watershed plans, one of the requirements is that you have to have goals. So we took a look at our mission and our system and decided what do we need to identify to create goals that would be meaningful both to the waterway and the stakeholders within our watershed. So one of the things we want to have is that our water is clear enough that you can see to the bottom in shallow water. We're realistic about our goals. That our water's free of the excessive nutrients that are causing the algal growth and weed growth that we're having, especially last year. It was really bad. That our water is clean enough that we can boat, that we can swim, and that we can eat the fish. That we have reached out, and tonight's one of the things that we're doing to try to reach out to our stakeholders and keep people engaged, and that our communities have land, physical land that allows us to access the watershed so that we can monitor and maintain the system. So you never want to be the red map, but unfortunately we're the red map. The entire system is impaired based upon the EPA standards. We have far too much phosphorus, which causes us to have an excess of aquatic plants and algae. We have suspended solids. We've got a lot of sediment that gets stirred up in our system. Our fish consumption is limited because of mercury and polychlorinated biphenyls. And our impairment is driven by inflow that's coming within the watershed, from outside the watershed, and actually from within the lakes themselves. One of the ways that it's measured of what is the maximum that our system should be able to take in, and where are we relative to those maximum recommended. And as you can see on almost every measurement, we are well over what the maximum load should be coming into our system. One of my committee members refers to it as the chain needs to go on a diet. We need to reduce our nitrogen loading by 45%. That, with a reduction of phosphorus, will reduce our plant and algae growth. Phosphorus reduction, which we need to hit 82%, which seems like just such a huge number, but that's contributing to our harmful algae blooms. Our suspended solids, we need to reduce that by 68%, which again will reduce nitrogen and phosphorus. And if we can get those suspended solids out of the water, it'll improve our water clarity. And then bacteria loading, which is really what we're going to kind of focus on today. Obviously, you don't want high bacteria levels. It was estimated that we need to reduce that by 70%. So what is the area that we looked at? If you look inside this big black line, that is the entire Fox River watershed, which is 1,200 square miles upstream of us that's draining into us. We are this little yellow area, which is almost 33,000 acres, but it only represents 2% of that total 1,200 square mile Fox River watershed. Within our little yellow area, we've got 13 municipalities and communities. So that includes townships, county, villages, all within that. And we have 2 different counties. This is one of the things that I learned when we did this watershed. You know, how do you identify where you should focus? And there were already these areas that are identified, the hydrologic unit codes, and you can see each one in the solid black line. We took 4 of them in this planning area, and they are named as Chain O'Lakes. That's the one up top where Buzz is, the Bassett Creek, the Nippersink Lake, which includes quite a few of the lakes, and then the Pistake Lake. Within that, there's 18 miles of streams, 210 miles of shoreline, and to the point at the top of the presentation, we need people to do things locally, and that'll help us address our local problems. We can't control what's upstream of us, can't control what's downstream, but we can try to control what's within our watershed. As part of the study, Jeff looked at where are all these elements coming from, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, the sediment, and the bacteria. And the nitrogen load, the biggest contributor to nitrogen, nearly 48%, is from direct runoff within the watershed. Lake erosion, so imagine those shorelines that are just falling into the lakes themselves, contribute 88% of the sediment load. Our septic systems, they estimate, contribute 98% of the bacteria load. And within that internal lake loading, that stirring up of the sediment, we're getting 47% of the phosphorus contribution. So what does this all mean? What were the takeaways from this data once it was gathered? Well, we're getting loading from 3 sources: outside our watershed, within our watershed, and then the actual release of the nutrients that are already in the lakes themselves. And our phosphorus level is really elevated. Nitrogen's trending lower, but it's still far too high. As water comes through our watershed, the chain is a sink. The water slows down, it drops the sediment, nutrients, and bacteria within us as it passes through and heads southward. They do find bacteria at beaches, but that is the only spot that is measured regularly. And it's every 2 weeks during the summer season. And that's the only bacteria measuring that we're doing currently. That nutrient resuspension, when we're stirring up all that sediment, and that internal loading of the shorelines falling in, are a major source of our phosphorus. Failing septic systems, while we don't have definitive data, we all know well enough that it's a major source of bacteria. One of our presentations that we had during the watershed planning process, I believe Jeff used somewhere around 8% assumption that they were failing. We had a gentleman that actually is a septic installer and servicer, and he said, based on his experience in our watershed, is probably closer to 20%. So it's significant. And then back to that lake shoreline erosion, those unprotected shores of cattails that get beat up by the wind and beat up by the wave action are dropping sediment at a really alarming rate into the system. So what can we do? It seems like such a huge problem. What can individuals do? What can these entities do? The villages, the townships? Obviously, reduce, store, and filter runoff. We are encouraging rain gardens, bioswales, whatever we can do to slow this water down and filter it before it gets to us. We would love to see more sewers, obviously, but we'd also love to see people actually maintain their septics, which Buzz is going to talk about. Expanding the water quality monitoring was a goal, and we were thrilled when Lake County Lake Lovers came to us last year and invited us to be part of the program, and we're excited to be part of the program again this coming season. It's really the only consistent data monitoring that occurs on the chain, other than the every 5 years that the IEPA comes to us. We want to coordinate with groups outside. One of my committee members was at ILMA yesterday, where Mary was as well, trying to get the message outside of our planning area. Within our area, we're talking to the townships, the villages, trying to get them to adopt the watershed plan and also include it in future planning so that they can implement the best management practices. We, like everyone else, need money. The Fox Waterway works on a really thin budget. They're a little bit over $2 million a year to maintain 7,000 acres of water. So you can imagine there isn't a lot left for special projects. We also had hoped to hire a watershed coordinator, but again, with the limited budget, we've not been able to do that. However, we had an intern all last summer who was amazing, created some GIS mapping for us, did some polling of our constituents, helped with expanding our outreach, and we hope to have another one this summer to help as well. So now I'm going to hand this off to Jeff because he's the one that did the yeoman's work on gathering the data about the septic systems within the watershed.
Thank you, Pat. Well said. You're really getting good at this. You know your stuff. That's pretty awesome. Uh,
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeff Boeckler, and I'm going to be doing a little bit of a deeper dive into septic systems, which are just a portion of the sources of pollution in the chain. So I'm going to go through what we did to come up with those numbers that were shared previously, and then some statistics, and kind of end with what's happening with them in the chain now. And then there'll be a shift over to Buzz. He's going to talk about septic system maintenance, and then I'm going to go back into a little study we did in another lake of how you can actually prove that septic says or disprove that septic systems are a problem in your lake. So in the chain, to come up with the numbers that I'm about to present, we collected information from all over. We first gathered information on which parts of the watershed or were sewered versus which weren't. This includes data from municipalities and the county health department. They do a really good job of mapping the areas that are served by sewer, not necessarily the locations of septic systems themselves. So, in order to come up with a number, we had to put a dot on every home and business in an unsewered area that was not connected to a sewer system. And I'm not kidding. We actually did that. We determined from there an average septic system failure rate. I believe we used 15%. That's kind of the Illinois average, or literature-based average. However, as Pat mentioned, talking to contractors that do this work, and then I was talking to others, it's very likely higher than 15%. And then from there, once we knew how many we have, right, that aren't sewered, and what the failure rate is, from there we can calculate how many are actually failing, and then come up with a loading estimate. And so that's what we did. And we calculated annual nutrient and bacteria loading based on the number of people, homes, and businesses associated with the septic systems themselves. Next slide. So what we found is 5 of 8 municipalities have a sewer system, which is great. 5 of 9 unincorporated do not have a sewer system. This means a lot of septic systems still out there. Fox Lake actually has the greatest number compared to other communities. 8,800 and change septic systems that we found are located within 1,000 feet of a lake. On average, they are 576 feet from a lake or a stream. 19% of all those systems, 8,872, are less than 1,000 feet from a lake or a stream. Closer you are to a water body, if a system is failing, the more likely those pollutants are going to be entering said water body. So, of those 8,872 systems, we estimated about 754 are failing. Running the calculations, that translates to an annual load of about 24,000 pounds of nitrogen, 9,500 pounds of phosphorus, and A whole lot of bacteria. 1 million change billion coliform forming units. I know that sounds like a lot, but the way coliform forming units are, there's just a lot associated with an amount of bacteria. Next slide. So there is work being done, however, to address this. There are feasibility studies underway now, and this is presentation is a little bit dated. I think this has been 2 years since I've given this, but at the time, they are looking at connecting 1,900 systems to sewer in Channel Lake and Lake Catherine, 2,400 additional connections in Grass Lake, Petite Lake, and then Loon Lakes, which isn't in the watershed, however, another 1,100 connections. If these things are implemented, so we also analyze that the what if scenario, if these things get connected to a sewer and we remove these potentially failing systems, what can we achieve? About 9,000 pounds of nitrogen coming off of that total, about 3,000 or 4,000 pounds of phosphorus coming off of that total, and about 500,000 billion coliform forming units. And hot off the press, just saw a news release, an additional $1 million has been allocated to the area to do a feasibility study to get 5,500 more properties on sewer. I don't have any more information other than just that, but this is moving in a positive way. So this map, it's kind of hard to see, but this map shows sewer municipalities in the pink, and then the areas that are proposed to be connected to a sewer system in the hatched areas. And underneath all of that, those green dots are septic systems. And so I'm going to pass it back to Pat to go online and show everybody a really cool map that shows not only that, but other ways that the chain can look at potential best management practices beyond septic systems.
So here's the map, and if I take all these layers out and leave us with just the septic, there's what Jeff was referring to. Every single one of those dots, God bless them, they put them on this map so they could figure out where all the septic systems were. This map is available for anyone to look at. It's in the Fox Waterways water quality page. If you click on project map, you'll be able to pull this map up. It allows you to look at, and I'm going to take septics off and point reductions. So for instance, it's suggesting that all of these dots, every one of these homeowners where there's a dot, if they put in a rain garden, it'll have an impact. And it's not just if you put it in, it'll have an impact. If you hover over the actual dot, they quantify what the impact would be, what the cost of the project would be, and how much those can potentially reduce the load. So it's a really fantastic working map for us to go out and talk to homeowners and homeowners associations to give them an idea of what just some small projects, what impact they could have on improving water quality within the system.
And a lot easier to navigate than a 300-page document with static PDF maps with dots all over them. This way you can actually zoom in. It's really cool.
One of the things that I talked about relative to the load that comes into the system is shoreline erosion. And if you see these red lines, if anyone boats on the chain, that's Crabapple Island by Sue's Kamikaze Corner. The load from that is significant. And that is one of, for instance, our unsecured shorelines. If you take a look at the sediment load and the amount of sediment that gets dropped into the system every year, 1,300 pounds per foot that we're losing over in Nippersink Lake. So like I said, this map is available. Anyone can hop on it and click away. We'd love to see people use it. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to really anyone on the advisory committee.
Beautiful.
And we'll go back to our PowerPoint.
I just want to mention there are a number of experts who are involved with mapping on the call, and maybe if they have access or want to share resources also in the chat for maps of this area. We welcome that.
That'd be great. One of the interesting maps, if you just go on the just the general GIS map that you can find to compare the historical aerial shots, and you can see the impact of shoreline that has been lost over time.
Yeah, some segments are losing like 6 feet a year. It's
Wow.
crazy.
Yep. So we are now going to bring on a homeowner, a septic system owner. And Buzz, you can take it away from here.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks for the introduction.
You bet.
My experience here has been a homeowner with 3 different septic systems over the last 30 different years, 3 homes. The diagram you'll see here is just a basic, on the upper right-hand side is a basic septic system where it shows the septic tank and then the distribution box and the leach field. What we want to talk about here today is probably one of the simplest things to do to maintain your system is have it pumped out. And what that is pumping out is, if you look at the sludge tank, a pump out should occur every 3 to 5 years for most homes. If you've got a large household, every 2 to 3 years. The cost of pumping out a septic tank is between $300 to $500, relatively inexpensive. If you don't pump out your tank, what happens is that the sludge from the tank goes into the leach field. And now you're replacing the entire leach field, which could cost you anywhere from $12,000 to $25,000. So when you have a septic system, the simplest maintenance you can do to it is keep up on the pumping out the septic tank, and not allow the sediment or the sludge to get into the leach field. It's real important with a septic system, you're careful what flushes down the drain. Only human waste and toilet paper. One of my recommendations is that if you have a home here that has a septic, in the guest bathroom where you have visitors use, it's always a good idea to have a sign or some kind of notice there, as you see on the right-hand side of this presentation, showing that septic tanks is being used here, that you only want to flush toilet paper and other natural waste. A lot of times when you have people visiting your home, they might not be aware of you're on a septic field, and or don't know the requirements of what you can and cannot flush down the tank. It's important to never flush flushable wipes, paper towel, feminine products, coffee grounds, cat litter, or large amounts of bleach. The problem with putting a large amount of bleach down the field is it kills the bacteria that's in that septic tank. The bacteria kind of eats through the sludge. If you put a lot of bleach in there, it's going to kill that bacteria. You don't want to pour harsh chemicals, grease, fats, paints, or solvents down the drain. There's lots of additives you can buy. I'd avoid using these special additives for your septic systems, as they generally don't work and usually deteriorate the system even more. If you have a garbage disposal, avoid using it. It can shorten the life of your system. Faucet drips, fix them immediately. I was surprised to see that a faucet drip can add up to 11% additional water into your system. When you're doing laundry, spread those loads out during the week. On off days when you're not doing laundry, run your dishwasher on those days. The key is spreading out your water usage over a period of a week, so you're not constantly putting a big load on the field and on the leach field every day. Simple things like installing high efficiency toilets, ones that flush 1.28 gallons per flush, or washers and water restrictive flow shower heads and faucets. You could reduce your water reuse 20% by doing simple things like that. Things you don't want to do is you don't want to drive or park vehicles on your leach field. You don't want to put trailers, boats on top of that septic area. It's not a good idea to build a shed, put a patio, put a pool, or even plant trees or shrubs on the leach field. Turf grass is the best thing to cover the field. Make sure your gutters or sump pumps drain away from your septic area. Some of the signs that you're having septic trouble, slow drains throughout the house. You'll hear a gurgling of your pipes or sewage back up in your tubs, toilets, or drains. Sewage odors. Investigate the source. If it's coming from a neighbor's house, discuss it with them and report it to the county if it's not resolved. Look for wet or soggy spots in your yard. Pat, you want to next again? One of the things I wanted to talk finally here about is that some of the newer systems have a filter in the end of the tank. If you look at the septic tank up above here in the picture, you'll find a little filter that's at the very end of that tank. The purpose of that filter is it stops the solids from getting into the leach field. Those filters have to be cleaned very often. If you don't clean them, it stops water from flowing into your leach field and the tank will overflow. My personal experience with these filters is I have to clean them at least 4 times a year. What's involved with cleaning them is you have to pop the lid off the tank and reach inside and pull that little blue filter out. Hold it over the tank and rinse it out. So any newer systems built within the last 10 to 15 years probably have a filter installed on the back of the tank. If you're not maintaining that on a regular basis, that's going to clog and you're going to have water pouring out the top of your tank. Some of the resources I provided here, Lake County has a great resource for septic pumpers. Those are companies that provide pumping of your septic fields. There's also private entities that will perform well in septic inspections. Lake County has a list of those. And Lake County also has a list of septic system providers. Those are all the links for them. When in doubt, I've attached a link for Lake County Essential Permit Department, a phone number, and an email for the health department if you need to get a hold of them to talk about septic tanks. That's my information. Pat, back to you.
Actually, back to Jeff. He's going to give us a little bit of information on another lake and the case study that was down in Fish Lake, Indiana.
Thank you. Yeah, so the numbers I presented before were estimates of what could be happening, not knowing exactly what systems were failing and where. There is actually a way to evaluate whether or not septic systems are having a direct impact on water quality. And I'm going to do a case study for a project we did for a client in Fish Lake, Northern Indiana, LaPorte County. Actually, kind of a similar lake to Chain O'Lakes. High water table, pretty dense homes around the lake, and they had an issue where a business was trying to push for a sewer system to come in. This business was using septic systems polluting the lake as justification for that. Well, that was a problem for residents because their very low property rates with a sewer system would have skyrocketed if that went forward. So they hired us to evaluate if septic systems actually were an issue. We assessed the occurrence and extent of septic leachate. We tried to determine, and we did determine, if septic systems are negatively impacting water quality and to what extent. And in the end, tried to address residents' concerns relating to those and give the Lake Association some actual data to work with this business owner and try to keep the status quo, if you will. Next slide. So how do we do this? We didn't come up with this method. This has been done before. We poached this method from some work done in Colorado a number of years ago. It involves multiple things. So directly measuring septic pollution in a lake is not just one thing. You have to do several things. We looked at a couple of different indicators of potential pollution, one being optical brightening agent. So Buzz mentioned the laundry. That's what goes into a system. Soap goes into a system, and you can detect through various ways that type of soap that might be leaching from the septic system. We also looked at dissolved organic content so we could correct and figure out between what's naturally occurring and not. And then we did a deeper dive once we did some prioritization based on initial screening, the bacteria, and we went a step further, not just collecting bacteria data, but doing DNA sourcing to determine if it's pets or if it's geese or if it's human. And then another indicator, nutrients. We talked before about phosphorus and nitrogen being a result of failing septic systems. We also measured that. And then some other field water quality parameters. That picture you see there is a sampling unit that we use to collect samples 1 or so feet off the bottom of the lake, rather than just putting a bottle in the top of the lake. Next slide, please. So we went around the lake. We did this two times. We did this once in October and once in July. So October is kind of the slow time, not as many people visiting lake. And then July is the part of the season when everybody visits. All the guests are over there and using the toilets and everything. So we wanted to get a kind of a baseline of normal conditions versus the heavy use time of the year. We did the florimetry assessment for those optical brightening agents on day 1 of both of those sample events. We took water quality samples on day 2 of each of those sampling events. We took those samples near the shore where septic leachate would be detectable more likely, and 1 foot from the bottom. Like I said, I showed you that sampling equipment for being able to do that. And then we sent the various samples to accredited laboratories. The one we used for the DNA testing is called Source Molecular, and they're based out of Miami, Florida. I'm not sure if they're still operating, but they might be. E. coli organic content, which we use to correct the optical brightening agent data, and then nutrient results were sent to other labs. Next slide. This map shows the results of our assessment of the potential for soap, and then the location of our samples. We first did a screening and collected this data, the indicators of septic system pollution, and then used that to refine which actual samples we took to a lab. So if you haven't done DNA source testing, it's very expensive. At that time, roughly $500 a sample plus $500 just to ship the stuff because it's got to go overnight. So we didn't have the luxury and the budget of doing hundreds of DNA testing. We had a budget for say 4 or 5 samples. Next slide. So what did we find? After crunching all the numbers, doing all the assessment, we found no widespread concentrated or localized human bacterial contamination in the chain of lakes. We did have 1 human DNA hit, but that was actually from a tributary stream entering the lake and nowhere near any of the homes. All the nutrient samples we took at each of the sample locations were undetectable, so no phosphorus, no nitrogen. Treated septic leachate is likely entering the lake. However, there's no evidence that any measurable impacts were happening. And if anybody has any questions about that, happy to answer. I was quite surprised with the results, actually, but all the different indicators that we looked at indicated that septic systems were not causing a problem.
Beautiful. I know Bill is having some problems with his Wi-Fi, so he asked me to oversee the Q&A, and I just want to thank our panelists for a wonderful overview of how to steward a watershed and take care of understanding what are the issues, and then provide steps to take care of it, and showing through Buzz, the homeowners, that he totally gets it. Once you get that education out there and have people participating at their property level, it really can make a difference. But we have a number of groups here. Thank you, Chris, recently retired overseeing her own lake. Chris, if you just want to chime in, if you're take your voice unmute. It's nice to have you here with tremendous experience from the EPA.
Well, thank you, Mary. And I'm no longer EPA, as you said, so I'm Sunset Lake all the way down in Girard, Illinois. But I've got a question for Jeff on the stepping up from a foot from the bottom of the lake. Is there a maximum depth where then you say, hey, we're down 20 feet, we don't go, but the depth is 40 feet. Do we go down 39 feet? Or do you know if there's a maximum depth on that? Or is it mostly you're so close to the shoreline that it's going to be shallow anyway, and this is a moot question?
Yeah, I think it depends on the lake. I don't think there is a maximum. Just happens to be that in this particular situation, we had shallow water. But if you have a major drop off in another lake, for example, maybe you are going 20 or 30 feet. The point is to just get the 1 foot off the bottom near the bottom, whether it's 20 feet or 2 feet. I'm not aware of any maximum depth.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent. And then Paul, if you could unmute.
Sure, thanks. So the conclusion, I think, was it based mostly on the comparison of the October versus July measurements, or was it on additional input or measurements?
Both situations showed no indication of septic leaching. We thought that we would see some big difference in July or June or July when lots of people were at the lake, but we actually didn't see any difference between the two events.
So one follow-up question then. So when you were looking for basically the fluorescent soap containing things, then if you saw them, that would kind of tell you what a clothes washer or a dishwasher was putting that into the water, and then that would kind of say, okay, well maybe that septic stuff is not working like it should or something, and that's why you did that test. Is that, am I understanding it right?
Yeah, so it's very difficult to do this work and definitively say septic systems are a problem. So you have to use a bunch of different indicators. The whole soap thing is just one of the many things we looked at, and the initial screening part. So that was the least expensive thing we could do. We just bought well, it wasn't necessarily a cheap, but a unit where we could take hundreds of measurements easily in the field along that shoreline versus taking hundreds of water samples, sending them to the lab, waiting for the results. So even though that piece doesn't tell the complete picture, it allows us to do some screening and a deeper dive into those areas where we got a hot hit, if you want to call it that. Yeah.
So one more follow-up question. I read some study done in Michigan somewhere, and they used conductivity soon after a rainstorm ended, where maybe a failing septic system would be, saturated and there would be runoff. And so they went near the shoreline, looking for conductivity increases compared to the normal level. Is that I saw conductivity mentioned earlier. Is that another parameter that you guys kind of looked at?
It is another parameter that we looked at, and nothing in those results jumped out at us. Mind you, when we did this study, it didn't follow any major rain events. But yes, that was another parameter we looked at. It just nothing jumped out at us from the results to indicate that that would tell us something or not. All the results were well within the range we would expect with no pollution.
Thank you.
Yeah, very interesting. I just want to give a shout out to Paul Spiewak, who is our tech team lead organizing the 12 lakes who are measuring last year, 100% of whom are coming back. As Pat mentioned, there's 6 this coming year from the Fox Waterway who will be participating. But it's very interesting to see what people measure and what allows them to take action. And I have 2 questions just on the map that you had. Have you heard of people more easily acting on it, or how have you felt the response has been to putting all that data together to show what you could do and actually seeing people do it? Maybe Pat, that's for you.
It's a messaging challenge. So we have shared it in our presentations. We are working on gathering HOA contact lists, which has been really challenging. I think we're up to about 30 of them now, and we've barely scratched the surface of the myriad of HOAs in the organizations that vary from, there's a couple of people and it got formed and we own a piece of land and nobody's on a board and can't figure out who to contact. But those are the folks that we've been trying to reach out to push the map out to encourage them within there. We're also sending the messaging out to the communities like Johnsburg and Fox Lake, giving them access to that map. But this is really an ongoing project, getting this messaging out there on that. So we don't have any direct feedback. Really, the only entity that we can measure that is doing a project is the Petit Lake Park folks. They almost kind of were working on this hand in hand with us while we were doing the watershed plan. They spent about 4 years working on a project because runoff was going straight through their park from Route 59, concentrated in a pipe and just shot out into the channel And they've been working with the township and their HOA and have managed to get some grant money from stormwater. And they are doing a project that on the map was recommended that they do, but I don't think we can really take credit for it because they had started it almost hand in hand with us. You're muted, Mary.
So very humble and very good to know that you're working to get the message out there. There are some really good lakes participating tonight. Loon Lake had a number of people, and also Cedar Lake, and I know we have Rob here from the Fox Waterway as well. And I'm wondering if there were specific things that you were seeing your homeowners challenged with, Alan or Mary or anyone else who wants to chime in with the maintenance of your septic.
Well, I'll chime in. We are a fairly new group, and we are concerned that there probably are some failing systems around Cedar Lake, and have been trying to use public education so far, and will continue those efforts to encourage people to really maintain their septic systems. Part of what I'm listening for a little bit here tonight is what other measures are taken to really sort of promote and convince people to be good stewards of our lakes. Anything more than just education that you're doing?
I mean, the waterway is attempting to educate the people within the watershed. I know that Lake County has data on their website to encourage people to do it, but they certainly don't contact any homeowners directly. And they have no one that goes out and checks those older systems with any regularity and will be unlikely to do so. So it becomes almost those of us with the boots on the ground trying to get the message out there.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good. And go ahead, Rob.
I want to just, if I can jump in just for a sec. So Jeff, when you think about how we opened this presentation, though, it was lakes with septic systems, on average, they're the worst. Then you get sanitary sewer, then you get undeveloped. And yet the study that you did points to minimal impact. So how do you, and then you think about in our plan, we have strong recommendations that we should be working on septic systems. So there seems to be a contradiction there.
Yeah, so even though I did say that they like similar lakes in terms of develop around the shoreline, Fish Lake is almost a pristine system. The water quality in that system is immaculate. So our theory there is even if they are contributing to a problem, there's a lot of dilution going on. It's such great water quality that maybe you're not seeing as much of an impact, or it's not as noticeable. And there aren't nearly as many septic systems on that particular lake as there would be in your particular chain. But yeah, I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, so a couple of key points. I think what I hear you saying is the density is probably higher in our area. And I think maybe one of the other things, so I'm making an assumption here, but age-wise, how young or how old was that community compared to, like, I know our community, like I'm assuming my septic system is probably 80 to 90 years old.
Whoa.
Whoa.
Well, you don't have one anymore, didn't you? Bulldoze the house.
I still have the septic
You
system.
still have the septic system. Okay.
I
Just
think
don't have a house.
one other thing that occurs on the chain that may not occur on Fish Lake, we've got all those fields that are in close proximity to the water, and then we have high water events. We were lucky we didn't happen to have one, but with enough regularity, we have instances where there's significant water sitting on those old leach fields, compressing them, making them less effective, and also during that high event, taking a lot of pollutants into the water once the water recedes.
Yeah, Fish Lake doesn't have that issue. Their watershed's one big sponge, so they don't. Yes, they do have high events from time to time, but it is not as extreme. And they don't have the Fox River coming in from a gazillion miles upstream, pumping all that stuff in there. It's a much
Mhm.
smaller watershed as well.
Mhm.
So I guess that so I don't want to. So you wouldn't change the recommendation on our septic systems in our watershed plan.
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Especially after talking to some public health officials and stuff about what's going on, I do think it's an issue in your watershed. Even though I just estimated this stuff, I don't have any direct data. My gut is telling me it's a problem.
And does that answer your question, Alan Melser, or would you like to unmute and chime in on the Fish Lake?
Yeah,
Well-
just in terms of
Oh.
what agency we have, you were referring to me, Mary?
Oh, I'm sorry. Alan Melser also
Oh,
chimed
I'm
in.
sorry.
He's
Oh, I'm
former.
sorry.
So I think you had answered. Thanks.
Okay, you had answered.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I mean, I can answer his question. We did the same thing in Fish Lake. We started with a lake diagnostic study for them 2 years or 3 years prior to the actual septic system study, and we used the same methods to estimate a potential load. We did not directly evaluate each septic system to see if they're failing. That's actually a very difficult thing to do to get access to be able to do that. But this whole study came about because of an incident, right? That caused concern in the community. And that's how, otherwise they would have never done this. If that business owner didn't raise a stink to try and get sewer into the area, we would have never done this study.
Mhm.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
One other thing I throw in there is we did do a social media video last year on septics, and communicating very similar messages to what we did this evening, and it was well viewed, I would say.
Pat did an excellent job. Yes.
I can talk about poop.
Yeah.
So for everyone that's on, we do have a YouTube channel. We also have Instagram and Facebook, but certainly the YouTube channel is where we've got all of the videos, short form and long form, that we've made over time as part of our educational series. So if you like and subscribe, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll put that in here. But as you're talking about that, it's a sort of messy topic we have tonight, and I'll just be bold about something that was mentioned earlier about the level of beer that's drunk on the chain, and then how quickly it is dismissed across both sides, and how in mulch toilets and other places they've learned, like, if you can divert the urine in some way so that it's not, adding to the high nitrogen content in the waterway, it might be a strategy. I don't know if anyone's looked at that at all, or looked at mulch toilets rather than septic, because they're often used with RVs, or maybe a cleaner way of handling waste. Does anyone have any exposure, or maybe even Holly Hudson with the Chicago Metropolitan Planning Council, looking at the broader use of waste management as a whole?
I'm not sure, frankly. You would have to look at what the stance is of the Lake County Health Department on mulching toilets and introducing them and incorporating them into your current on-site wastewater treatment system. The recycling of the beer on the chain, I don't think we'll ever be able to, that's a cultural thing. So I don't think we'll be able to change that. But yeah, and the bars and taverns don't like it when the people come off the boat who have consumed much not on their tab and use their bathrooms. So they really discourage people from visiting and using the bathroom.
Many more cultural and people change issues there. chat than actual technology or the physical realities. And Mary Lomas asked the question. You go ahead and unmute, Mary. You're looking for resources. And Mary's an excellent PR person for getting the word out on things that we can do for our lakes. She handles Loon Lake and has a beautiful presentation on their collaborative efforts to get rid of milfoil.
I think Robert, he mentioned something about increased homes in your watershed that were going to be hooked on to sewer systems. And in that slide, I think he had mentioned Loon Lakes, that there was like 1,500 houses that were scheduled. And I was just wondering where I can access information or who I would contact to access information so we can follow that effort.
That was actually on Jeff's slide, and they are not scheduled.
Okay.
They were part of a study that was done. I'm trying to think if Kevin Hunter is your contact on Lake County Board. There was a study done in the 1990s. That study got brushed off with some ARPA money. So the county re-looked at it. I want to say it was 2020. It was several years ago that they brushed the study off and identified all those systems and identified the cost, which at that time they estimated was $186 million to connect those three groupings that were the Channel Lake, Grass Lake, and Loon Lake.
Right.
So you could probably get it from the Lake County Board. Lake County, perhaps the health department may have that study available, but there is nothing scheduled right now, which is where the $1 million is going, because it's one thing to put sewers in, that has to go somewhere into a sewage treatment plant. And right now there isn't capacity to expand to these other areas if they don't expand the sewage treatment plant.
Yeah, it's just proposed.
Yeah.
There
Well,
is a line item in because Rob Bryson paid attention to the Lake County budget, and there is no line item in there for the next 4 years. Rob, was it for sewer?
So I took a look at it and just looked at their long-term capital plan.
Yes.
And of Lake County, and well, not long-term, next 4 years, and for the next 4 years, there's no spending on sewer systems in our area.
Okay, thank you.
And so you look and say it's gonna be a challenge, and the tough challenge is us sharing the message, because a lot of people are like, why would I want that, right?
Yeah, because it's a direct cost to them, probably, right?
yeah. So
And there's
I'm going to throw one more thing out there. Just when we last year there was a Pewaukee Lake presented at the Fox River Summit, and it was their sanitary sewer district that they presented, and they actually did their lakes. They started back in the 1980s, and to do it, they established 14 pumping systems around the lake so that they could, so things flow downhill. So they had to change that direction. And, so they now have a sanitary sewer district that they manage, and it really helps manage the lake too. It has two functions. So they use that same tax base to manage the lake, and they use the same tax base to manage the sewer system.
excellent. Well, and that's why we come together here to share these resources and to better understand what we can tap and the experience that each of you have to solve these challenges. An individual here that actually prompted us to develop Lake County Lake Lovers is Dave Shackleton. He's here working on enzymes and dissolved oxygen in lakes and was instrumental in showing the toxic cyanobacteria conference that we can end this continual monitoring for HABs. But Dave, I don't know if you had any questions or suggestions based on what you're seeing with septic before we close. Quick comment.
I think I've shared it with you in the past. I don't know if you can hear me. I'm on my phone. I was on a call to India a little earlier, so I tuned into this on my phone. We've done extensive work on this. We've done community septic tanks where there's hundreds of people, there's hospitals and things like that on septic tank, as well as individual ones. And we were able to bring these things back to functionality within a matter of sort of weeks. I can share some of that information with you again, but it's something we've done, tried and tested in far harsher conditions than we see in the US.
Yeah, and you have actually been on a call here with Jeff Boeckler talking about muck munching. So I will put that into our chat so people can also follow those discussions that we have, and hope that you can all mark your calendar for a month from now when we will be talking about shorelines with a Sea Grant Institute sharing their progress with homeowners addressing shoreline restoration plans. And that seems like it would be very relevant to what Jeff mentioned earlier with the massive erosion efforts happening with the shorelines in addition to septic flow. And all of these things combined, but we welcome your suggestions for topics in the future. And also if you know of people, I see, oh, that's great, Christine, septic socials. That sounds
So
very interesting.
Randy
Go
was a part of the watershed plan, and we did talk about septic socials with him as well. We do have some of the materials from that. I know that he's trying to enjoy his life of leisure and has retired. So, but they did, and they had septic socials where I think they gave gift cards or whatever to get people, or gave X dollars off of septic pumping. Wasn't that right, Rob? If I remember correctly. You know, if you came and listened to the message, you got $25 off your next pumping.
Interesting. So what a fun way to do it. And I know you also have your Fridays at the lake in the summers where we have bands and social reasons. And we find that Lake Lovers is really helping to bridge both the relational aspect of caring for our lakes, because they do provide our social outings, as well as just the knowledge and technical capacity. So unless there's a question or final comment from anyone, maybe just the panelists could share one final takeaway.
Actually, I just want to tag on to what you just said, Mary. It's not only social. The Chain O'Lakes is a huge economic driver in Lake County.
Absolutely. Yes.
It becomes unusable.
Mm-hmm.
That is a lot of lost dollars to our county.
Mm-hmm. Very, very important. So the economic impact of caring for our lakes is key. And Buzz, you've been quiet. The measuring. What is your final comment for tonight?
My comment for the night is, if you haven't had your septic field or septic tank pumped, get it pumped. It's cheap maintenance.
Very wise. Yep. Saves you a tremendous amount in repair or mitigation after a catastrophe. And Jeff.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of talk. I guess I started it of the impacts of septic systems, but it might be good to try and pursue a grant or a partnership to do a similar study to what we did in Fish Lake, and having actual measured data, good or bad, makes your case a lot better one way or another, right? So, I mean, even if it is just in one part of the chain, one lake where we know it's all septic, even just doing something there would go a long way.
Yeah, and I think I heard someone mention while we were at ILMA that you actually do a great job with grant writing. Isn't that true, Jeff?
I do, but that's a hard stuff to get. That's a hard one to get funded. That one.
Okay.
The Lake Association we worked with has a budget. They levy taxes. That's one of the cool things about Indiana. Lake associations levy taxes within their watershed, and that's what they use to pay for their lake management. It's a fantastic model. I wish that happened in Illinois.
Yeah. Well, that would be, we all wish. So, well, maybe if we talk it up, maybe it will. And I think Mary had one final question. Is there any benefit of using the non-liquid washing detergent, versus the liquid? I think.
Right. I don't know if, like, a lot of people now are using the strips that just go in, and so from an environmental standpoint, so they don't have to buy the big jugs and everything. I don't know if you're familiar with those.
I stopped using the strips because they have plastic in them.
That's what I was wondering, if that was good or bad for your septic system and for the lakes.
Just me personally in the research, because I was using them to not have to buy the plastic bottles, and then I read some more about the fact that they have plastic in them.
So Pat, it's because because the strips then have microplastics in them?
Yep. And they also sometimes don't completely dissolve, so they can begin to clog your washing machine.
Okay, thank you.
And
Wow.
don't put those dishwasher tabs in that have the dissolvable covers on them either, because that's microplastics. You know, those pods,
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
that's all plastic.
right.
Wow. Well, so I put in the preview, the Lake Lover playlist, so you guys can see the muck munching, wonderful overview of all of the different organizations that support lakes by Paul Spiewak. There's information on lake fundamentals, things you can learn in between these sessions. But March 19th, we'll be back here for the shoreline discussion and welcome other folks for that. And then in April, we're going to talk about lake lessons from our schools. We have beautiful school programs where the kids are going out 1,000 at Libertyville High School in May. We'll go out on kayaks and explore how to measure and manage their lake for the future generation. So thank you all for what you're doing. I think you've all been stars in parts of these programs. So hopefully we can expand the network and have everyone be a lake lover across the county. And you guys are an inspiration for that. So thank you for your time. And you know where to reach us in the Lake County Lake Lover community or at Fox Waterway. And let's just reinforce what the others are doing. And thank you all for your time tonight. I pray it'll be returned back to you in some wonderful way as you relax for the rest of the evening and
Thank
enjoy
you,
this
Mary.
beautiful weather.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. See you next month. Thank you to our panel.